Well, I finally got her fixed back up. Well, hey guys, I'm back once again with another Linux vlog, talking about my experiences, frustrations, adventures, and whatever else you want to call it, with using Linux for just everyday computing. Now, something I want to talk about, it's actually sitting behind me here, is my updated Linux file server. Got into Linux. It was about the early 2000s. That was one thing that I just sort of picked out. I was like, you know what? I like computer networking. I like networking resources and computers together. What's a way that I can use Linux in a good practical sense, a good, thing that I could actually fully utilize what it's capable of and really kind of get used to it. And so to me, a file server was one of the things that popped up. It's like, you know what? We've got, over the years, myself and, since I've gotten married and we have a daughter and everything, we've accumulated lots of data, whether it's music and movies over the years, whether it's, various documents. And now with our daughter, who just turned 2, we're accumulating lots of pictures as well. And I'm sure those of you out there as well, probably, if you think back in your lifetime, you've probably accumulated lots of data too. So that was one of the things I thought of early on, that with Linux, let me see about making it into a file server so I can have a place to back up my files at. And I'm about to go ahead and show you my latest update to my file server. All right, here we go. First off, I want to apologize for any kind of dirt and debris and things like that that you may have seen kind of scattered around here. I'm slowly been in the process of getting my man cave slash basement slash computer area and all this stuff sort of cleaned up. So it is pretty messy right now. Although compared to what it was before, it's a lot nicer. Okay, what you're looking at right now is what's known as an application on Linux called Top. Basically, it is for those who don't know, it's basically a process thing. I can watch all the processes on the server, and kind of see what's running and stuff. I could, easily go in here and if something were to be like hanging, if there's a process out there that's, sort of using up a lot of memory or something, and then maybe it's froze up or whatever, I can go here and actually terminate it, and kind of get the system back up, running smooth again. That's, at least from my experience, I've rarely even had to do something like that. Normally I just leave it up like this just because it's kind of neat to watch and stuff. One thing I will tell you is that since I've been running a file server, everything here is command line. I do not do a graphical user interface on it. So, it's kind of like, if you're used to Windows, it's kind of like the old DOS days. But it's not, DOS by any means. It's, of course, like a Unix-like system. So, a couple things here. You can see I'm running Debian 10. And something else I want to point out too is just, here recently I decided I was going to call this poor man's NAS, because that's essentially what my file server sort of is. Those network attached storage, those NAS systems, I've seen them run from like $150 on up, and that's sometimes even without a hard drive in them. So you're in the end, you're probably paying about, $300 to $400 for basically a storage area where you can store a lot of your data and everything. So, this is actually an old desktop PC that I replaced the power supply in. The power supply fried, so I replaced the power supply in it, and basically for right now, I slapped every large hard drive I had in the thing, just to use temporarily until I can get some larger drives. Give me a drink here. The largest hard drive I have in it is a 500 gig, and then I have a bunch of then I have about 3 more smaller ones, about 320 gig down to 250 gig. It's not much, but it was at least enough to sort of get started and get our files kind of transferred over. It used to be I had a single 320 gig hard drive that I was backing stuff up on, but what's happened is, of course, is like I said, over the years, data has just gotten a lot more. We've gotten a lot more data and a lot more stuff to back up. So basically the whole plan is that I was going to use, kind of set it up like it is right now for now, until probably here in a few months down the road, I'm going to be getting some really good sized terabyte drives that I can kind of back everything up on. But for right now, this is kind of what I'm working with, until I get those drives in. And really, honestly, this kind of gave me a good chance, too, to sort of go through and get our files organized. Because before, they were very disorganized, and, you know, I had stuff copied everywhere. So this kind of gave me a good opportunity to not only back up our stuff, but also kind of go through everything. What I actually just ran here, it's the disk-free command, disk-free, and that's the H switch is basically telling it to make it more in a human format, as they kind of call it. So if I run, just to give you an idea, if I did without the switch, it's these large, you know, much larger numbers that most people couldn't make sense of. So if you do the H in there, that makes it into G for gigabytes. So you can kind of make it easier, and then M for megabytes, and so on. Just a couple things here you can kind of see that this is the 500. Of course, I've made the directory or mount point of that drive as S500, so I would know what drive I was on and how big it is. And from what I've done so far, I'm using 73% of it. And you can kind of see here I've got a 320 drive. There's another 320 drive, and that's got 19% on that 320. And I'm still going through data. I'm still going through things and getting things organized. So, it's quite a chore. Another cool thing here too, for those that are new to command line only Linux, no graphical, there's I don't know the proper term for it, but it's basically like a terminal session, terminal window. Normally, like in a graphical user interface, you have different windows, and you can just kind of, close the window, minimize it, change the size of it, and so on. In this, you would think initially that you're just stuck to just one screen. But actually, if you do Control-Alt and then your F keys, I think F1 through F6, that can actually switch through to different things. So here's Control-Alt F1, where I'm running top, my process application. F2, this is where I'm doing some more, or Control-Alt F2, I'm doing more work here with, of course, you see here. We do Control-Alt F3, here's another term, or another shell login that I can log back into it. Control-Alt F4, that takes me to this terminal here. So, I can really kind of multitask, kind of going back and forth to different screens. So it's not like I'm just limited to just the one. So for those who don't know that little handy tip, there you go. Control-Alt, and like I said, I believe it's up to F6. There's 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's all they give you, but that's still plenty, really. In Linux, there's a lot of since there's really no graphics here and all that kind of stuff. A lot of things are done through configuration files, which kind of set the parameters for how different programs here run. And with a configuration file, normally you need some sort of text editor to edit those files if you need to make a change. So what I can do is there's a text editor called, I use Nano. It's just a quick and easy one that I can run to. And here's where I can open up different configuration files and make changes and things like that. So, and down here you've got, of course, different commands to sort of get through it. I mean, I can just type in random text here, basically. But in order to like do certain things, get help, the little caret and then the G, that means you do Control G, and that's how you get your help. Control O is basically write out or save it, save your file. And then of course you have things here for doing text and things like that. Control X is what exits the nano program. As I say, modified buffer, answering no will discard changes, so I'll just hit no, and it takes me back to my shell login or shell. Something else I do kind of run on here on Linux, on Debian here. Something I do occasionally like to do is run a monitor on the network. This is one I found through Debian's applications or package list. It's called Biman. It's not bad. I mean, it's. I don't know if I'm going to stick with it, but it was just something I can use for the time being. I might look for some other ones out there. And there are like commands that I can use, like the apt-get command is what I can use to sort of search for packages to install, or update ones that are already installed and things like that. So now, as far as I'm going to exit out of this here. Now, as far as navigating around, let me show you some cool stuff with that. I'm going to clear the screen here so you can kind of see more. As far as navigating around, if you're familiar with DOS, dir was a kind of a common thing. But dir it's okay, but ls is kind of the preferred one. I do this ls with the LSH switch. I always prefer it that way. This shows me. Here's some more in-depth Linux stuff for those that may not know. So this over here shows me my permissions for a certain file. So basically the first, and these are all in sections of 3. So there's read, write, and execute. Okay. So, and then there's going to be there's an indicator over here if it's a directory, for example. So you can see I got read and write access to this particular file. And then if you're in a, if the user is in a group, it shows the group read, write, execute permissions here. So this is just read for the group, and this is for anybody else. They can just read it. So that's kind of how that works. Let me give you a better example on some of that. I'm going to log in as the administrator. The administrator on a Linux Unix system is always root. And here I'm just basically what I'm doing here is in Windows you say run as administrator. That's kind of the same exact thing I just did here. I'm going to say run as administrator, and I can do things here with that. Root is very powerful. You could basically ruin a system if you don't know what you're doing. So change directory, that's what the CD is, to the main root directory, which basically the root directory is this. That just, that's the start of everything. So, and of course it scrolls so fast you can't see everything on one screen. So here's a good example of seeing everything. So you can see over here that, the D for directory, read, write, execute, and then you can see who's got permission. Over here is your user, the owner of the file or directory, and over here is the group that they're in. So I guess I don't want to make this a full Linux tutorial. I still learn stuff all the time. There's probably stuff I don't know too, but just to kind of give you a little in depth into some more stuff about Linux. Actually, it's a good thing this is up here because I'll show you this as well. Since this is a file server, I share files from this machine, this server, with whatever is on the network. And I use a program called Samba. Now, we mainly have, at least around our household, there is some Windows computers. And Samba is what really sort of helps Windows computers see a Linux file share, so to speak. So if I'm sharing, this particular directory, the Samba application on Linux is what's going to help Windows see that share that I'm using. So that's why you'll see the Samba thing in here. This is actually the group I've created for Samba, but that's the program that's used. And there's a whole like config file, setup file that I use for Samba to set up those directories and shares and who has access to them and things like that. So, so for example, my wife and myself, I do also have a Windows computer as well. We connect to the Linux server through the Samba program on Linux to be able to see those files or to see those directories and files and can access them and things like that. So Samba is what's primarily used for that. I think the more I'm going to dive into Linux, as far as the more I kind of explore and do things with it, I'm going to start looking for looking at other file sharing things as well. I think NFS is another one that I really haven't dabbled too much with NFS, but I do plan on eventually sort of dabbling with it as well, because I am going to be setting up some Linux laptops or other Linux computers and use those as well. But Samba is the primary thing used for file sharing. It is the primary thing that I use for file sharing between the Windows computers and the household. So as far as that's really about all the servers used for. Like I said, it's just a file server. It's just basically to store our documents and things. But it seems like it's probably as time goes on and things, I might start going to add more to it and playing around with different things. But for right now, it's initially kind of set up how I want to do it. And like I said, I think the only thing really left, the only thing really left at this point that I know of is waiting for those hard drives to come in. It'll probably be here in the next couple months, getting some good terabyte drives in so I can actually have more storage to work with and get our stuff backed up. So I really don't know what else to cover, so I think I'm going to wrap it up. Like I said, I'm finally glad I got the server up and going and got it back in here so we can start really utilizing it and getting things backed up on a regular basis and everything. So, but anyways, that's all from me, guys. I want to thank you all for watching. If you have any questions on this video, there'll be more to come, so don't think I'm just stopping with this or anything. So, but if you have any questions on this one, feel free to leave me a comment or anything, and I'll answer you. So, but that's all from me, and we'll see you in the next video.